All right. Okay, there we go. Well, welcome everybody to my house, chez moi, and to my kitchen. It's a delight to be with you again. You all know that I'm the Archbishop, and I have a sous chef this year, Paul Ido Aranmude, who's one of our seminarians. You may remember Father Remy from previous years of cooking in my home, and he made a name for himself. With the cooking spray. But anyway, I don't think we're going to face that this evening. It's a delight to be with you again. We're still in January, still sort of the new year, and glad to be able to join you via the ministry of Kyle Grenham, our communications officer, who is filming this, and we'll put it all together. So I wish you a Happy New Year, and thanks for joining us. This evening, I chose as the meal to make what I call Chesapeake chowder. I am from Nova Scotia, you might know that. I was born and raised, I was born in Halifax, but raised all over the place. My father was in the Air Force. We lived on Air Force bases. But I still call Nova Scotia home. And the little village where my family is from is called East Chesapeake. Chezzet, Chesapeake. Apparently it's an indigenous name for something, I don't know what, but anyway, it's an indigenous name. My people are Acadians from way back when. And so when I go home, what I call home, even though I've not lived there in many years, when I go home and visit my sister and my cousins and all that, I stay with my sister, and she always makes this chowder the evening that I arrive. Wow. She puts it together so that when I walk in the house, not having eaten on the plane for several hours, I come home and Joanne, my sister, has all of this ready. So this is what I chose to make this evening. I got the recipe from my sister, and any of you who saw it, because you can get the recipe, I'm willing to share it. I don't think there's any copyright on it because my sister is the one who put this together. And so anyway, so this is what we're doing. We're going to cook this meal, this chowder, seafood chowder. We'll have, again, a presentation that I'll do this time on what makes a church a cathedral. And we'll have some questions, some quizzy kind of questions. We got silent auction. We have all kinds of good things to keep us entertained this evening. So we're going to begin with, and I'm just going to follow any of you who know me will know that I will often say, if you know how to read, you know how to cook. Because all you got to do is follow the recipe. And so that's what we're going to do. We've pre-prepared everything so that it shouldn't take us so long to put this together. So it begins by saying, I'm going to get a pot out. I've got to get a pot, and I am going to use, no, not that pot. I'm going to use this pot. Yes, okay, so this is what I'm going to use. This is one of these pots that seems to have a very nice base to it. So that's what we're going to use. So I'm going to put that on the stove, and we'll turn it on. I'm going to say maybe not quite at maximum. So it says to melt 2 tablespoons of butter or hard margarine in the pot. So here we've got I'm going to say that is 2 tablespoons. I think that looks like 2 tablespoons. And if I can find where there it is. Okay, so I'm just going to throw that into the pot. Now, my sous chef, I'm going to suggest that he do some of the stirring. This is a spatula that I use a great deal in my kitchen. And so if you just sort of watch that, Paul, and I'm going to throw this in the garbage. So it says to melt the butter, lightly saute onion, carrot, and celery until the onion is soft. I'm sure many of you know what that means. So I've got onion, celery, carrot. Once we get the indication that the butter is melted, then I'll throw all these ingredients into the pot, and Paul can sort of stir it gently as we go further into the evening. Oh yes, okay. So let's have a question. So these are questions. These are about bishops. And so the first question is, and of course, you know, in the church, we have all kinds of names for things. Even to understand the etymology of all these words, I don't know. But anyway, so the question is, what is the name of the large hat a bishop wears at Mass? So this is the large pointy hat. Okay, and so what is that large hat called? Because there's another hat that the bishop wears at Mass, and it's the little purple, well, purple, yeah, it's really magenta, but it's a skull cap. Now that has a name too, but we'll see if that's one of the questions. But the question is, what is the large hat that the bishop wears when he celebrates Mass? Now if some of you are embarrassed that you can't name all these things, let me tell you, until I became a bishop, there were all kinds of things about bishops I did not know. Even though I had been a priest for, 25 years, there were many things about bishops I knew nothing about. And so I had to learn all kinds of things that I had never known before. You know, there's a line, Paul here, our seminarian, could tell me this, because I say this to Paul all the time. I say, you know what, Paul, the day you learn nothing is a wasted day. See, he knows the line. That's a line my father used to use with me a lot. And I quite appreciate that line. The day you learn nothing is a wasted day. So since becoming bishop, I've learned all kinds of things, not just about bishops. Some of you know that I was very involved in the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement. I learned lots of stuff about residential schools, but more than that, about indigenous peoples, their culture, their traditions. Got to learn all kinds of things, and I was grateful to be able to learn all these things. How are we doing on the...
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to bring over, first of all, the onion, and we'll put that in. Now you see it's starting to cook there. So you mix that around there, Paul, because that has to, what we call, soften. I'm just going to put this in the sink. Okay, so the large hat that a bishop wears at Mass is called a mitre. M-I-T-R-E. Now, you know, any of you who are carpenters will know that there are two basic types of joints in carpentry. There's what they call a butt-end joint and what they call, so keep stirring that, Paul. So there's a butt-end joint where one piece of wood meets another. But there's also, and you see these, I mean, even around my house, most of the joints are mitre joints, where the two pieces of lumber meet at a 45-degree angle. And because there's two pieces, it makes a 90-degree angle. Okay, so anyway, so the mitre, if you took my mitre, and sometimes when I visit schools in the diocese, and I'm showing the young children in the school different things about a bishop, and I talk about the mitre, I usually like to find a few mitre joints in the classroom and to point out to them that the mitre that the bishop wears has a resemblance to the carpentry joints. Anyway, so that's the same word, mitre, that the bishop wears and that carpenters use as they're building your home and putting finishing touches on the door sills and all these kinds of things. All right. There's another question there you want me to... Okay, here we go. So here's another question. What is the proper name for the shepherd's staff the Archbishop carries? Aha! So you'll notice that the bishop will carry a staff. There is a name for it, a proper name. And one of the things, again, I never really knew this, is that the bishop only uses that in his own diocese. It's the sign of the authority of the bishop, and of course, in another diocese, I have no authority. That bishop has the authority, just as I do in our diocese. I'm the spiritual leader of our diocese. So this staff, which, maybe I should have had some of these things here to show all of you what they are, but I'm sure you've seen the bishop's staff. The one that I use, I really like it. It's made out of wood, carved, And so again, when I visit schools and I show the students I was going to say the word, but I'll tell you the word in a minute, the bishop's staff, I point out, I say to the kids, I said, where have you ever seen this before? And one kid said, Little Bo Peep. Right, Little Bo Peep. She's not a bishop, but anyway, she has a shepherd's staff because he's a shepherd. And we know that Jesus was really a carpenter. He was not a shepherd. There is nothing that says that Jesus actually tended sheep, but he used that image, which is found in the Old Testament, to speak of the ministry of the leaders of the people of Israel, that they are shepherds. And then the prophets especially really bawl out the leaders of the people, the kings and the leaders, for not being good shepherds, for feeding themselves rather than feeding the sheep, taking care of themselves first rather than taking care of their people. So unfortunately that happens. Anyway, so let me tell you, if you haven't already guessed what the name of that staff is, it is called a crozier. C-R-O-Z-I-E-R, crozier. In French they call it la crosse. Anyway, that's the staff that the bishop uses. And again, it sort of speaks to the role of the bishop in the diocese as a shepherd. These are the ones, the people that the bishop is called to take care of, to guide, to lead, to protect. Okay, and often, again, going back to what I say to the children in the classroom, you know, when the bishop has the crozier, and I'll demonstrate it with the kids. I can't do this here, but I'll say to them, you know, the two of the actions of the bishop that are very important is to create unity, so to keep the sheep together. Sheep tend to wander from one another, so I say one of the things the bishop might use, or a shepherd might use a staff for, is to keep the sheep together. The other thing it can be used for is a weapon. So if a wolf comes, you know, the shepherd can say, wolf, you keep away from my sheep or I'm going to hit you with this stick. And so I think the twofold ministry of protection and unity are present in the image of the crozier that the bishop uses. Now, how is this coming?
I think it's coming fine.
Okay, let me just look at this a bit. Oh, that looks very, very good. Okay. I would say that has now become soft. So let's see what it says now in the menu, the preparation. Add potatoes and bay leaf. So I'm going to take these potatoes and we'll put those in there. And
the bay leaf.
And the bay leaf. Now the bay leaf, if you look over on the counter there, Paul, you'll see it says bay leaf. Okay. So now believe it or not, all we do, it says bay leaf, not leaves. So we'll take out one leaf and we put it in there.
Just one leaf.
Just one. That's what it said. One bay leaf. I'll say, and so, and then it says add enough water to just cover these ingredients. So could you use this, Paul, get some water and add it to the pot, just enough to cover what we've got there, okay? Again, just following the instructions. So yeah, it's going to start to, right, it's going to sizzle like that.
One more?
I'd say one more 2 cup, yep, and that'll be about it. And so that says to bring it to a boil, then reduce to medium heat and cook until the potatoes are tender, about 10 minutes. So let's, I think the temperature is right. So if you just gently stir that as it's starting to boil, okay, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So we have a live auction this evening, a number of items that you'll see on your screen that we're trying to auction off. Of course, the highest bidder, when the auction is called on that item, gets the item, and we look forward to your donation to this cause. Now, you know, usually we've only said about the Archbishop's dinner that the money that we raise is for the needs of the diocese. We decided with this Archbishop's dinner to have a specific need that we want to use this money for. And this has to do with the chapel at Camp St. Martin. Camp St. Martin, as you know, happens on the grounds of Camp Artaban, just north of Grimshaw. And on the grounds there, the property is owned by the Anglican Diocese of Athabasca. But they have a committee that governs this Camp Artaban. There are many different groups that use this camp. I was a bit surprised to learn that. I thought we were among the only groups in the area who use that Camp Artaban. No, there are many. And so we had a special meeting with the leadership, the committee that governs the camp, and got to meet the others who use it. It was good to meet them and to sense the commitment that people have towards Camp Artaban for all of the programming that happens there. One of the buildings on the site, on the property, that is not in the greatest of shapes is a chapel. Now, these other groups that use Camp Artaban, they're not religious groups as such. We're probably the only religious group, specifically religious, that use it. So for us, the chapel is an important building, and yet it has not been kept up like some of the other buildings. We have in Berwyn, those of you who know Berwyn, we have a church that we've closed, I'm going to say, a good 10, 12 years ago. So we've not used that church, and we've put it up for sale. Nobody was buying it. We tried to think of the local people. Some of the locals wanted to make it a museum, but they couldn't convince their regional authority to cooperate with this. So anyway, we've decided what we want to do is we want to give that church, the church in Berwyn, give that to Camp Artaban. We would make no more claim on it. It would be their church, but we would put it there. We would do everything to get it there. We would need to build some kind of a foundation, and then we would transport it. And we're looking into the feasibility and the cost of doing this, but we know that it's going to cost something. So this is our idea about the fundraising for this dinner, is that what we raise would go towards the moving of the church the Catholic Church in Berwyn to the property of Camp Artaban, where we have Camp St. Martin, so that there would be it's a very nice church. If any of you have seen it, very nice little church. And so that would be there for our campers' use, but there may be other of the groups or different people that use the property that might appreciate having such a sacred looking building to use for the backdrop of pictures or whatever. So that's our plan for this, to put it towards the relocation of the church from Berwyn to Camp Artaban, where Camp St. Martin is held. I think that's a great idea. How is our dinner coming?
Very good.
Okay. Well, it's not boiling yet. We're going to wait a minute until we get I wonder, is there another one of those questions that we could sort of talk about a bit? Okay, now, so what is the name of the chair in a cathedral in which the bishop alone can sit? Mm-hmm. So there's a chair. It's the bishop's chair, and it's only the bishop who can sit in that. They can't use it as the presider's chair at Mass, where whoever the priest is presiding. He doesn't sit in that chair. No. This is a special chair only for the bishop. And so we have that because our church, St. John the Baptist in McLennan, is our cathedral. That cathedral has that special chair. And as we've said, only the bishop can sit in it. Now, I want to tell you a funny story. Mm-hmm. So a number of years ago, when Denis Blanchette, any of you know Denis, and Denis, when he came back to Canada, he was in Ireland with the Legionnaires of Christ. Thought he was being called to be a priest with them, and then that didn't work out. But anyway, so he came back, and when he came back to the diocese, we hired him as the youth minister for the Archdiocese of Grouard-McLennan. One day, Denis was showing a class of students, school students, through the cathedral. And so he was pointing out things that maybe they wouldn't know about, describing the Stations of the Cross, or maybe the altar, or different pews, or a statue of some saint or other. Anyway, when he came to the bishop's chair, he said, now this, he said, is the bishop's chair. And he said, it's only the bishop can sit in this chair. And one kid apparently put up her hand and she said, well, what if we did sit in it? And then he said with a straight face, he says, you'd die. Well, no, I mean, we're all going to die, aren't we? Okay, but anyway, but it sounded very dire to the student, of course, that, oh my gosh, if I sit in the chair, I'm going to die right away. I'm going to be zapped by God. No, that's not going to happen. But it is only the bishop who is to sit in that chair. And so it's reserved for him. We'll say more about that later on when we talk about cathedrals and churches and everything else. Yeah. Okay, so the answer, the name of the chair in a cathedral in which the bishop alone can sit is called a cathedra. You see the connection linguistically? Cathedral, cathedra. So what this is a very special item in every cathedral. You would go into, you would see that there is a chair, and you should, when you go into a cathedral, you should look for that chair and locate it, because that is where the bishop presides from, and so is considered. It's almost like I think of some families, for instance, where maybe the patriarch, grandpa or grandma, have a chair, and maybe it's a rocking chair that is very special, and they might not say in the family that only grandpa or grandma can sit in it, but certainly when grandma and grandpa are there, it's their chair and everybody knows it. And so out of respect, we all, oh no, that's your chair, grandpa. No, you sit in there. We're not worthy to sit in that chair. Okay, well that's somewhat the same idea, I suppose. It's that in the family there is a certain deference that is shown to people of honor, people of status, and we like to honor them in that way. Now at Christmas, Christmas this year was different, was it not? There was very little cold, there was very little snow, and as I have done a number of years, I have gone to places in our diocese where there weren't enough priests at Christmas time. And interestingly enough, because the Little Red River Nation in the northern part of our diocese is probably the place where I have gone most often, not every year, but most often I've gone there for Christmas. Because there are 3 churches in that nation. They have 3 communities. Each community has a priest's house and a church. And so for a number of Christmases, the one priest who was assigned to cover all those places would ask me, Your Grace, is there a priest can come and help me? Because it's Christmas. And we're trying to say Mass in so many places. And so in a couple of instances, I have gone myself. And this is what happened this past Christmas. I went up to John Doerr Prairie. We have Father Andy, relatively newly arrived in our diocese, and I've assigned him there temporarily. And I'm glad that I did. He's doing very well there. And but anyway, so I went there for Christmas. If any of you know the Little Red River Nation, the 3 communities, the most isolated of those 3 communities is Fox Lake. You may have heard Fox Lake in relation to the wildfires last summer. They were evacuated. The community was almost obliterated. Lots of buildings, not all, lots of buildings burned down, people's homes. They had to evacuate people to John Doerr Prairie, another one of their communities. So anyway, so I went up there and helped Father Andy in saying Mass in these communities. One of the things, so as I was saying, Fox Lake is one community that is most isolated of the 3 of them, because you have to cross the Peace River to get to it. There are other 2 communities, John Doerr Prairie and Garden River, are on the north side of the Peace River, and Fox Lake is on the south side. So you've got to cross over the river, and usually, because it's cold up there, the Peace River is frozen by the time Christmas comes around. So you can drive on the Peace River. You can drive on the river to get over to Fox Lake. During the summer months they have ferries, but they can't have ferries in the winter. So this becomes how to get to Fox Lake. And so this year, because the weather was so warm, the river didn't freeze in the same way. So we had to take a long way around to get to Fox Lake. Boy, oh boy, this was a bit of a challenge to be doing this. Anyway, so how's our
I think it's coming.
oh yes, oh that looks very good.
Yeah.
Very, very good, okay.
It's coming very well.
Well, okay, so let's just read a bit more here. It says that we bring this to a boil, reduce to medium, and cook until potatoes are tender, about 10 minutes. Now I'm going to look at this and let me see these potatoes. Let me just see what they look like. Okay. All right.
Are getting there?
I think they're getting there. We might leave it just a couple more minutes. Maybe if we put the lid on again. And so as I say, this is a seafood chowder. This calls for 4 types of seafood. Haddock or other white fish, salmon, scallops, and shrimp. Roughly the same amount of each of those, although I see that as I looked it over, I've got more of some kind of seafood and not another, but that's all right. It's all seafood, and if you're like me from the Maritimes or Newfoundland, you might love seafood. Certainly I do. This is what I grew up on. I know that in Alberta, everybody talks about Alberta beef, and so a lot of Albertans are beef eaters, and you know, this is important for people around here. Where I come from, it's more seafood. I was saying to Paul before we started that when I was a child, and in those days we didn't eat meat in Lent, and so we the only things open to us were non-meat foods, among them fish, and so we would be eating fish all through Lent. For this would be no hardship at all. It's all like, wow, it's Lent. We can have all the fish we want, you see. It defeats the purpose of being penitential. You're supposed to deny yourself, and yet here we're gorging ourselves on fish that we love. But anyway, so whenever I go home now, you know, in Chesapeake, this little place where my family's from, there is a wharf that the government built a number of years ago. And there are still fishermen in Chesapeake who go fishing. And so they'll go out in their boats, they'll set lobster pots, they'll come back with lobster, they'll come back with beautiful cod. And if you go down to the wharf and get the fishermen when they just came in, you can talk to the individual fishermen and say, can I buy a cod? Wow, I got a nice, really, I mean, and this is fresh fish. It's not frozen. It's right out of the water. You take that home, you cook it. Oh man, it's wonderful. So those are the kinds of things that you know, I was raised on. My family being from that part of the country. My mother was born in St. John, New Brunswick, but they moved to Chesapeake when she was just a young girl, and so she sort of considers Chesapeake to be home. Both my parents are deceased now, so I mean they're not there. But my sister lives in the home that our father was born and raised in, and so it's always good to go home and to see that. Okay, so our next trivia question is, what are the sacraments that bishops are designated to celebrate? Well, actually there are 2 of them. Pretty well all the sacraments, not all of them, pretty well all the sacraments any priest can preside over. Okay, reconciliation, Eucharist, baptism, you know, all those ones. When it comes to the bishop and what is specifically his, one that he is usually the one to preside at, to celebrate, is confirmation. I say usually because the bishop can delegate a priest to do that. And I've known many dioceses over the years where, for whatever reason, a whole series of reasons, the bishop may say to the parish priest, you have my permission to celebrate confirmations in your parishes. I've not done that as a rule. I've had priests come to me and say, Your Grace, you know, there's this kid who missed confirmation and he doesn't want to wait a whole year to do it again. Could you give me permission to do it? I would say, yes, Father, you go ahead, you do that. So the bishop is the usual presider over confirmation, but not always. But the one that he always is, the one sacrament, is holy orders. I always point out to people, I say to people, what is holy orders? Priesthood. Well, yeah, that's not wrong, but there are actually, holy orders is in the plural. There's not one holy order, the priest. There are 3 holy orders of deacon, priest, and bishop. And it is only the bishop who can preside over those sacraments. So a deacon has to be ordained by a bishop, a priest has to be ordained by a bishop, and a bishop has to be ordained by a bishop. And usually the rule is that you need at least three bishops to ordain a bishop. You have what we call a principal consecrator, who is the guy who's presiding, and then you'll have 2 other bishops that are also going to pray over the priest in his becoming a bishop. And any of you who were at my ordination here in Grand Prairie, and we had the ordination here, we had many bishops. I think there were 18 or 19 bishops, but the principal consecrator was the nuncio at the time, and then my suffragan bishops were the co-consecrators. So, what do you say about the...
I would say it's really coming very well.
Okay.
It's even cooked.
Well, let's put. So we're going to put the different fishes in. So the one fish is salmon. So we have some salmon, and we're going to put it in here. Okay, there we go. We have shrimps. We have, this is a white fish. This I believe is haddock. And so we'll put that in. And last but not least, our scallops. So we're going to put those in, and I'm going to have you stir that all up, Paul. So we'll get that, and let me go back and see what these instructions say now. So it says that we should let the fish poach about, I think we should turn down the heat right now, a little bit, yeah. And it says let it poach for about 5 minutes. So this is we'll get 5 to 29. Okay. So we'll let the fish, but it says do not overcook or the seafood will become tough. We don't want it to become tough. Now, there are 2 types of milk that the recipe calls for. One is evaporated milk. So I'm going to open this can of evaporated milk. You know, earlier today, as I was working with Paul and planning this, I said to him, Paul, do you know what this is called? And he said, well, it's a can opener. I said, well, yeah, that's not at false. But I said, in my generation, we'd call that a church key. So he was surprised. He said, if I asked some people what do you call that, he said they wouldn't come up with church key. So we're going to add that in a minute. And I'm going to get some milk. It says, I think, 2 cups of milk. Let me just make sure of this. 2 cups of milk. So this is a 2-cup measure. And so we're going to measure out our 2 cups. One of the things that I do when I'm cooking is I follow the recipe. And some people, they like to make it up as they go. They have their favorite meals that they'll, they always cook it so they don't need to look at any recipe or whatever. I'm not like that personally. I feel that I need to follow the recipe. So if it says 2 cups of milk, it's 2 cups of milk. That's what it is. So let's see how we're doing here. So we had said 5 minutes.
Yeah. So
we got another minute or so to cook. We don't want it to get too tough. And so we'll add the milks in a minute. Do you have another question? Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, so this question is, now this is one of the things that when I became a bishop, I knew nothing about. Absolutely nothing. What is the name of the vestment that only an archbishop can wear? Now, if you've seen me, and it's not only archbishops, it's only metropolitan archbishops. There are some archbishops that are not metropolitans, they don't wear the pallium. That's the word. It's called a pallium, okay? And you may notice if you watch me when I'm around the diocese, there's a thing that I wear over my shoulders. It's white with black crosses, and then there's a front and a back plate that are black as well. That's called a pallium. It's made out of sheep's wool. And so the idea is that the archbishop is carrying the sheep on his shoulders. And so we put that ceremoniously around our waist, or around our neck, and wear that to signify this kind of shepherding that the archbishop is meant to speak of. I want to point out the thing about archbishops, because not all archbishops are metropolitan archbishops. For instance, I think a good example is the nuncios around the world. A nuncio is an archbishop. Just because he's a nuncio, he's the representative of the Pope, and so he is an archbishop. But he's not a metropolitan. He has no jurisdiction over a diocese or over what we call an ecclesiastical province. I'm a metropolitan archbishop because I'm the archbishop of the metropolitan, of the province of Grouard-McLennan. Not the archdiocese. The province of Grouard-McLennan involves the Archdiocese of Grouard-McLennan, but also the Diocese of Mackenzie-Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories and the Diocese of Whitehorse in the Yukon. So the bishops of those two dioceses are called my suffragan diocese, not suffering, we're not making them suffer, but they're suffragans, and so when I'm with them, and we might talk about different projects we might like to do together, as the Metropolitan Archbishop, I am the lead. I'm the leader of the three of us, and so this is so I am one who would wear a pallium. Let's see, how is this coming now?
Very well.
Okay, it's okay. I think we should put I'll let you do this, Paul. You put the milk and empty those both into that, okay? All right, there we go. So let's do a question, as you say, last question. Let's see that. Okay. In the Catholic Church, who are all bishops considered to be successors of? So who are our predecessors as bishops? Going back to the very beginnings of the Church, this is a long-standing tradition that we have in the Catholic Church, is that the bishops are the successors of the 12 apostles.
Wow.
Okay, so you have in the early church, in the earliest church, the 12 apostles who after Pentecost, and they received the Holy Spirit, and with that Spirit, I mean, they had all kinds of zeal and confidence to go and to preach Jesus Christ, even though they were martyred for it. They had all kinds of zeal and conviction. They went out and they established churches. They established Christian communities in many towns and cities in the Middle East. And I mean, this eventually grew to the whole world, okay? But what the apostles would do is, once they started a community, they would lay hands on somebody that they're going to leave as the bishop. And they would go off again as a missionary somewhere else, start a new church. Before he leaves, he's going to ordain somebody to be the bishop. And we see that the other two orders of deacon and priest developed after that. But the 12 apostles were the beginnings of the bishops in the Catholic Church. And not just in the Catholic Church, there are some other, certainly the Orthodox churches are very, very close to us. They follow the same traditions from the beginnings of the church that we in the Catholic Church follow. The Orthodox are very close to us. We have other churches, Christian churches, that have bishops, but they have not been careful about always keeping the line of what we call apostolic succession, going back to the first apostles. But they have bishops. Okay, so how are we doing here? What's, okay. Now the only thing I'm going to suggest, and I would suggest try it now.
Yeah.
So we've got salt and pepper. It says to put seasoning in, salt and pepper. So I'd say you put those in, Paul, and stir the chowder up. After you put salt and pepper. And then it also says dill. So you'll see one of the containers there contains dill weed. So I'm going to have you open that up. And just sprinkle some, just push it open. And sprinkle some dill on the top of it. Not a whole lot, but some. I want to remind you again about our auction. Again, items that have been donated to us to offer on auction at this supper. And so please look at those. See if there's anything that you would like to put a bid on. And the amount of your bid, of course, the highest bid gets the item. And as I said before, the proceeds of this dinner are going to go to the transfer of our church in Berwyn that has been closed for a number of years, to transfer that church building to Camp Artaban. Okay, so there's one more ingredient goes into this. Again, I'm following the recipe. There's a cup of grated old cheddar cheese. And so we're going to add that. That'll give some body to the juices in the chowder. So Paul will put that in and stir it around. Of course, it will melt into the hot chowder and become part of this beautiful meal. There he goes. He's getting it all in there. Don't leave any behind, Paul.
No.
We want to have every bit of
Nothing goes
delight.
wasted.
Nothing goes wasted. Amen. Amen. Waste not, want not. There we go. And then stir that all around. And as I say, the cheese will melt into the chowder.
Wow,
But it will.
that.
Look at that, you see. So, yeah. Oh, I tell you, that looks wonderful.
Very beautiful.
So we'll come back. I'm going to give my talk, and we'll come back, and Paul and I will taste the chowder. All right, thank you. What makes a church a cathedral? The word church has many meanings and definitions. We can mean the group of believers, men and women and children, who claim membership in a Christian denomination. When I say I decided to join the church, I mean that I underwent baptism or some other ritual that gives a religious expression to my identity. When I say in the pioneer days of Alberta, most schools and hospitals were run by the church, we are identifying the religious organizations that established these services and operated them. When we say the church burned down and now we have to build a new church, we're speaking of the physical structure, lumber and bricks used to construct a building. If I say I no longer believe in that church, I'm saying that I don't adhere to the teachings, doctrines, and practices of a given religious group or its leader or founder. Same word, but in each context, that one word connotes a special meaning. Whenever we speak about church, we understand the meaning based on the context of the conversation. For this evening's talk, I'll be speaking for the most part about church buildings. By accepted convention, the word church usually refers to Christian structures. We'll use different terms for the houses of worship of other groups. The words synagogue or temple are used for Jewish houses of prayer. Muslims call theirs mosques. The Jehovah's Witnesses speak of a kingdom hall. The earliest Christians did not have churches. The original Jewish followers of Jesus Christ and his apostles continued to pray in the synagogue, after which they would share fellowship with other Christian disciples. They didn't have specific buildings in which to gather, but were told that the wealthier members around them invited the others to their own larger homes for prayer, teachings, and sacraments. Historians refer to these as house churches. The wealthy homeowners were pleased to offer their home for the community's worship. With the rise of anti-Christian persecution in the Roman Empire, many Christians literally went underground, gathering in tunnels and carved out spaces beneath the surface of the earth. In these catacombs, they prayed and buried their dead, far from the prying eyes of those who judged this to be a secretive and dangerous sect. This all changed, of course, when persecution ceased under the Emperor Constantine in 312 AD, and more so as Christianity became the official religion of the empire in 380 AD. Christian liturgy became accepted as more and more public halls, known as basilicas, were given over to Christian worship. Many of these basilicas had been constructed for civic functions and to honor pagan deities. As Christianity took hold, such basilicas were turned over to the use of the Christian communities in cities and towns of the empire. Note that in these early centuries, the term Christianity referred to Catholicism. The great schism between West and East, that is, the Catholic and Orthodox churches, only happened in the 11th century. The Protestant Reformation took place in the early 1500s. Over time, there developed some standard forms of church buildings. One of these is the cruciform structure, built like a cross. This was popular for obvious reasons, as Christian devotion was directed to the cross on which Jesus died. To capitalize on the notion of the height of the heavens as the dwelling place of the divine presence of angels and saints, the ceilings of churches became very high. Further to this, 3 distinct spaces suited to different liturgical needs were assigned their rightful spaces within church buildings. The narthex is a space just inside the front doors of the church where the community might gather and from which a procession would start. By contrast, the placement of the altar was at the opposite end of the worship space. The nave is the central body of the church, where the seating is found. The word nave comes from the Latin word for ship. The French word for navire comes from the same root. This part of the church should make us think of an inverted boat, its hull acting as a central beam running the length of the church, from which ribs would form the sides. The image of such a ship making its way through choppy and dangerous waters was significant for the Christian community throughout the centuries. The sanctuary was not unlike the Holy of Holies in the Jerusalem temple, inside of which only the priest could be present, and where the sacrifices of the temple were offered. The sacrifice of the Mass is offered inside the sanctuary. Readings of sacred scripture are proclaimed from there, as well as most other sacred rituals. The lay faithful would come no closer than the entrance of the sanctuary to receive communion. An altar rail, or communion rail, would divide the sanctuary from the nave. There are other features and furnishings that have long characterized Catholic churches. Baptistry. Some churches have a distinct room or adjacent building reserved and structured for the celebration of baptism. A good example of a separate building is at the Lateran Basilica in Rome. Another fine example is the cathedral in Pisa, Italy. Note in this aerial shot the church itself in a typical cruciform shape, the baptistry, and a bell tower, best known as the Leaning Tower of Pisa due to its sinking structure. Engineers have recently succeeded in correcting the lean so that the body of this remarkable structure will not be lost. Bell tower. Many churches have bells in a spire, as in our own cathedral in McLennan. But another option is to have a separate structure to hold the bells. The so-called Leaning Tower of Pisa that I just referred to is a well-known example of a bell tower. Another local example is the bell tower at St. Joseph's Church in Grand Prairie. The ringing of bells had a practical use in a day and age when ordinary people did not have watches, and church bells would ring out the hour and half hour. In Christian settings, of course, church bells, more importantly, have the added function of calling people to prayer. Eucharistic Chapel. Many Catholic churches reserve the Blessed Sacrament in a separate side chapel or for private prayer and adoration. In many such churches, the tabernacle is not found in the sanctuary of the church, but in such a chapel. Some people think this is a modern accommodation and resent what they feel is a misguided removal of the Blessed Sacrament from the nave. In fact, this practice has a long and respected tradition. The four major basilicas of Rome, St. John Lateran, which is the Pope's cathedral, St. Mary Major, St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican City, and St. Paul outside the walls, all reserve the Blessed Sacrament in a special Eucharistic chapel. Ambry. An ambry is where the holy oils are reserved in a church. The Catholic Church makes use of 3 holy oils in the celebration of its sacraments. The oil of the sick, used in the anointing of the sick, the oil of catechumens used at baptism, and the sacred chrism, which is used in the sacraments of baptism, confirmation, and the ordination of priests and bishops. These oils are blessed each year by the bishop at the Chrism Mass. Traditionally, the Chrism Mass was celebrated on the morning of Holy Thursday, but can now be celebrated at any time around Holy Week. In our Archdiocese, the Chrism Mass is celebrated on the Tuesday evening of Holy Week. The sacred oils are then distributed to all the parishes of the diocese for the priest's use during the year. Stations of the Cross. While not absolutely necessary, Stations of the Cross are found in most Catholic churches. This devotion, which brings into local churches the devotion of walking the Via Dolorosa in Jerusalem, reminds the Catholic faithful of the suffering and death of Jesus. Most people are familiar with the traditional 14 Stations of the Cross, but in 1991, Pope John Paul II composed an alternate Way of the Cross. This also has 14 stations, but these depict more accurately the events of Jesus' suffering and death as found in the 4 Gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Presider's Chair. In the Roman liturgy, there are 3 locations from which the priest presides for the various parts of the Mass. He is at the chair for the opening rites and the first readings of the Liturgy of the Word. He is at the ambo for the Gospel and Homily. He presides at the altar for the entire Liturgy of the Eucharist. He then returns to his chair for the post-communion prayer, blessing, and dismissal. In every cathedral there is another chair, specially designated for only the bishop of the diocese. This chair is often ornate and is sometimes referred to as a throne. The proper name for this chair is the cathedra. This is the one piece of furniture that makes a church a cathedral. No other church in the Archdiocese has the bishop's chair. Wherever that chair is, that is the cathedral. The association is evident even in the similarity of the words, cathedra, cathedral. This is the answer to the question I posed for the title of this talk. What makes a church a cathedral? is the presence of the cathedra, the bishop's chair. The bishop, and he alone, may sit in this chair. As a side note, a basilica and a cathedral are two very different designations, although a cathedral may indeed be a basilica. A basilica is a church of some historic or other quality. A cathedral is the mother church of a diocese. A cathedral is not necessarily a basilica, and a basilica need not be a cathedral. For what it's worth, I contend that it's more significant for a church to be designated a cathedral than a basilica. In its history, the Archdiocese of Grouard-McLennan has had two cathedrals. The first was built in 1901 when the Vicariate of Athabasca was separated from the Vicariate of Mackenzie, and Bishop Émile Grouard established the seat of his vicariate in what came to be known as the town of Grouard. Bishop Grouard, an artist of some note himself, decorated the walls with images painted by his own skill. This church, dedicated to St. Bernard, was the cathedral until the seat of the diocese moved to McLennan in 1942. Bear in mind that a cathedral need not be a large church. It only has to be designated as the cathedral, and of course to have the one piece of furniture that is essential, the cathedra. By 1942, much had changed in Canadian society, including the means of transportation. With the construction of the railway, the town of Grouard was bypassed, and the rail line passed south of Grouard, heading west and north to High Prairie, McLennan, and Hines Creek before turning north again. The town of McLennan at that time was a notable town and showed promise of further growth and prosperity due to the rail yards. It stood to good reason for the bishop and his consultors at that time to decide to build a new cathedral in McLennan and relocate the chancery offices there. The bishop's residence and chancery offices were the first to be planned and constructed. The cathedral itself, dedicated to St. John the Baptist, came later. Construction began in 1945 and was completed in 1947. The cathedral was dedicated on October the 1st, 1947. Sadly, our archdiocese lost its first cathedral to fire this past spring on May 22, 2023. It was by far the most historically significant church in our archdiocese. Losing it in this way was devastating, to say the least. We have begun to look at rebuilding a church in that community. Of course, a new building will not make up for this great loss. I suspect that, like many cradle Catholics, I grew up in the Catholic community, taking many practices and customs for granted. I didn't wonder why things are the way they are. In about 1997, when I attended a Reform conference in Indianapolis, I was exposed to many practical design issues that apply to planning and building a Catholic church. I was amazed at what I learned. Let me finish with a brief passage from St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, where he refers to the people of God, united in Jesus Christ our head, as a spiritual temple. So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are citizens with the saints, and also members of the household of God, built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the cornerstone. In him the whole structure is joined together and grows into a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are built together spiritually into a dwelling place for God. In other words, what is the church? We are, each and all of us, with Christ Jesus our Lord. I hope this presentation has been of some interest and benefit to you all. The last ingredient we have some shredded cheddar. Heavens, what a meal.
Magnifique. Yeah, c'est magnifique.
Well, thank you all for being with us for this evening of making Chesapeake chowder, as I call it. Paul and I are ready to dig into this. We want to thank you all for attending. Don't forget to check out the auction. And I want to thank all those who donated, who made donations to the silent auction. That again is going to help us to move the church from Berwyn to Camp Artaban. So we look forward to being able to check that out once the transfer is made. Thank you for being with us. We're going to enjoy this chowder. Num num num. Mm-hmm. Very good, Paul.
Bon appetit.
Oh, beautiful.
So nice. I love this.